There's a ton of uncertainty when it comes to buying a property, especially your first home. And ultimately, throughout our lives, we're going to make mistakes when we make purchasing decisions, both in real estate and in everything else. And today, what I wanted to do is share with you my five biggest mistakes that I've made in buying and selling real estate so that you can potentially avoid those same mistakes and learn from the lessons that I had to suffer through. But before we get into it, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. And don't forget about a race to 25,000 subscribers where we're going to give away $5,000 to one lucky subscriber simply for subscribing. And they can use the money to put towards their RESP, their RSP, their TFSA, or even just to pay down their mortgage. It's $5,000. It's free. It's easy. It's definitely worth it. Go ahead and click that subscribe button. The definitive guide on how to manage your credit. Product, penalty, price in that order. It's never been more important to get your mortgage right. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's discuss my five biggest mistakes in real estate. And this, cumulatively, these five mistakes have probably cost me upwards of $250,000 just by trying to get in and out of the market or trying to outsmart the market. And I want to share with you basically what happened in each of these five scenarios, tell you a quick little story, and hopefully you'll be able to avoid making the same mistakes I did. So let's start first and foremost with mistake number one, which was trying to time the market. Now, I've talked about this in previous videos where back in 2005, actually in 2002, I bought a pre-build and decided to sell it in October of 2005. I was fresh out of university with my economics degree, and I was looking at all the data, and what it was telling me was that I should probably sell this property because the real estate market was going to crash. And yes, I was paying attention to the talking heads, just like me on the internet and everything else. And I was taking probably some poor advice from some poor sources. And as a result, I sold that property in 2005. I made a pretty significant amount of money on it. But in 2006, the market took off literally 3 months after I sold it. And that decision to sell in October rather than holding on to the property until January or February or March of the following year cost me somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000 to $100,000 in lost profits. So I tried to time the market. I thought I was smart to get out, and ultimately what ended up happening was I got out of the market completely, and I actually priced myself out of the market on my future purchases because housing prices had gone up so much when I had tried to convince myself that they had nowhere to go but down. And ultimately, housing values never went back down to what I predicted they would because, quite honestly, even the best economists can't predict what's going to happen in the real estate market, what prices are going to do. So my lesson from that, lesson number one, was to always try to stay in the market and get into the market at your earliest opportunity. And the second you try to time it, the second that you think that you're smarter than the market is usually when you're about to make a mistake. Now, mistake number two, the property that followed that first one that I sold in 2005. This property was an absolutely amazing condo. It was beautiful. It had mountain views. It was a penthouse. It was just gorgeous. And on this particular mortgage, I decided to go and try to get the lowest rate. Now, keep in mind, I was a mortgage broker at the time, so I thought I knew it all. And what I didn't know was that if you went to get the absolute lowest rate, it came with what was called a bona fide sale clause. And interestingly enough, the bona fide sale clause had been introduced just 3 months prior to me getting this mortgage, and nobody in the industry at the time really knew about it. And what that clause did was it made it so I couldn't refinance. I couldn't switch to go to a different lender. I was basically stuck in that term until either the term came up till the end of it or until I sold the property, which is what I ended up doing. You'll see that in the next lesson. But at the end of the day, I had a lawyer who was a good buddy go through all the documents. I went through the documents. We didn't see any reason for concern with this bona fide sale clause. We didn't even notice it. It wasn't there. We couldn't find it. And when we went back 3 months later, after we had heard a rumor that the particular lender that I had dealt with was putting this into their contracts, we went through and reread it. And what the term said was, this mortgage can be paid out at any time. And then it was comma, new line, only upon the sale of the property. So instead of saying you cannot sell this property, or you cannot get out of this mortgage unless you sell this property, which is normal people terms, in legalese it was this mortgage can only be paid out in full upon sale of the property. So it was just this minor tweak to language and legalese that basically put me in a position where I wasn't able to refinance or do any sort of mortgage planning with that mortgage. And interestingly enough, during the 3 years that I had that mortgage, there was opportunities for me to refinance to lower rates, but because of the clause in that mortgage that I had, I wasn't able to take advantage of those, costing me probably somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 in the 3 years I had that mortgage. Now, the third mistake I made was I sold a condo that I should have kept. And this is the same condo. And what happened was my wife and I were pregnant at the time. We decided that we wanted a house. We didn't want to raise a child in a condo. So we once again decided that we didn't want the risk associated with having an additional property because we thought housing prices might go down. Guess what? They didn't. They continued to go up. But we sold this condo. We were potentially going to rent it out, but the right person came along, it was actually somebody who was looking at the property to rent it. And we ended up selling the property to that renter because he wanted it so bad. And we had a lineup of other people who wanted to rent the property. So he said, I will just buy it from you in order to be able to get access to it and to live in it. So we sold it. And in hindsight, that was in 2012. That property would almost be completely paid off by now. It would be shooting off $2,000 to $3,000 in rent after condo fees and everything else. And it was probably a mistake for us to sell that because in 10 to 15 years, we would have had a pretty substantial amount of equity built up in that property. And it would have essentially paid for our child's education or any other number of things that we could have imagined using that money for. So it was a mistake. We ended up buying another property in 2014 to replace it as a rental because we started to see the value of having rental properties. We've since bought more, but selling that condo that was partially paid off and that we'd built up a significant amount of equity in was a pretty big mistake because that condo could have been a pretty big windfall for us somewhere down the road. And now when we have clients who are combining finances and moving into a house, and maybe they own a condo or two as a couple, we always advise them, keep those condos, keep those first properties that you buy because they become incredible investment vehicles down the road. And that is an advice that we give almost universally now, as long as people can qualify to carry both their existing home or the one that they're purchasing and the one that they owned previously prior to making the new purchase. So, selling a condo I should have kept, pretty big mistake. Fourth mistake we made, and this was after we moved into the house, was we tried to pay off our mortgage in a super accelerated fashion. The mortgage that we had, it was a Scotiabank mortgage. It was a 5-year fixed. I'll get to that in a second. And we decided that we were going to pay off the mortgage as fast as we could and use their prepayment features, which we were increasing our payments by 15% every year. So in 3 years, we increased our payment by 15% on day one. We increased our payment on the first day of the second year we had the mortgage, and we increased the payment on the first day of the third year we had the mortgage. So by the time all was said and done in a 3-year period, we had increased our payments by 45%. And everything was going along just fine until the market kind of tanked. We started making a little bit less income because the market was going in a downward fashion. This was 2015, basically, for those of you who know the Calgary and the Canadian real estate market. And as a result, money got really tight really fast. And when we started investing in our business and we needed to do a refinance on our existing home, what we found out was that because we had pounded all of our money into paying off the mortgage, and because we had chosen a 5-year fixed mortgage, we had a $25,000 penalty if we wanted to do any sort of a refinance to pull funds out. So unfortunately, I had to go to the bank of mom and dad. Thankfully, they helped me for basically a 6-month period. And then when the mortgage came up for renewal, we were able to adjust things and get the right mortgage at the right time in the right place and the right type of product, which leads me to number 5, which our biggest mistake. And this is probably the single biggest financial mistake I've made from the perspective of knowing better. But we did it when we bought this house. It was in 2012, and we were worried about rising interest rates because everything that had happened since 2008, all the economists, all the talking heads were saying rates are going to go up, they're going to go up, they're going to go up. And they were right, they did. But they didn't go up anywhere close to as much as what was predicted. And as a result, we took this 5-year fixed. One, we got into this situation where we had a massive penalty. And when we needed money, we couldn't get it out because the 5-year fix had that big penalty, which is, we say this about fixed rate mortgages: you pay more for them on the interest rate, you pay more for them on the penalty, and you lose your flexibility. Well, all three of those things drastically affected us. And the other big thing was, when we got the mortgage, we could have paid 2.5% and got a variable rate mortgage. Instead, we chose a 5-year fixed at 3%. So in the first 2 to 3 years, it would have saved us about $6,000 if we would have chosen the variable. On top of that, the discounts got bigger. So we could have actually lowered our rate to about 2% instead of having it at 2.5%, which would have saved us another $5,000 to $6,000. So basically, by choosing a fixed, we lost $12,000 because we were paying a higher rate than what we could have otherwise got on a variable. But here's the thing: interest rates did go up. And they did get up to that 3% range. They got up to the 3.5% range with respect to where our variable rate ended up sitting. But that being said, if we would have locked in all of those variable savings, we would have actually saved money in that first 5-year fixed term, because the rates never went high enough in order for us to be worse off. In fact, we would have been significantly better off if we had chosen to be in a variable rate mortgage, because we would have locked in all those savings in day one. We would have been able to use that money to apply it to our mortgage to pay it down faster. And then when we needed the money, we would have been able to do a refinance and pull the money out in order to pay the bills that we needed to pay to run our business without having to give $25,000 in penalties to a big bank, which is why today we tell people to always choose a variable rate, because again, lower price up front, lower price to get out of it, and significantly more flexibility. So those are my big 5 real estate mistakes that I've made over the years. Obviously, some of them costing significantly more than others. The one that really gets me is that I didn't follow my own advice. I knew all the data. I knew all the statistics. I knew I should have chosen a variable rate mortgage. It ultimately cost us a significant amount of money, which is why when we talk about variable versus fixed, we don't talk about the difference in interest rates anymore. We talk about the difference in the monthly cost and the cost over a year or two if you were to choose a variable over a fixed. And when we put it in the perspective of dollars and cents, there aren't many people who want to pay a $2,000 to a $5,000 to a $7,000 premium over the next year to 18 months in order to potentially get a lower rate or have a lower rate if and when interest rates go up. So, some lessons learned here. Obviously, that is essentially 15 to 18 years worth of experience, depending on how you look at it, whether you look at it from the time of first purchase or you look at it from 2003 when I initially got my mortgage license. But those are the same mistakes that we made. But those are the main mistakes that we made. And hopefully this video will help you not make the same mistakes. And in 2021, if there's one piece of advice I can give, if you think that waiting out the market is going to save you a whole bunch of money, you may very well be wrong, and you may very well end up paying significantly more for a house than what you ever thought possible. So my biggest and best piece of advice I can give somebody is get into the market at your earliest opportunity 25 years from now. Whether you bought at the top or the bottom, it isn't going to matter. But if you buy earlier, there is a chance that you will avoid buying at the very top of the market, which will ultimately save you money down the road. And ultimately, if you've got a place to live, if you're paying down your mortgage, increasing your own equity, it's still significantly better than paying rent. So if you found this video useful and you want to learn more, if you want to learn more about buying your first home, if you want to learn more about getting the lowest interest rates, I put links in the description below to 2 courses that we have set up so that you can have access to the exact same information that Mortgage 360 clients would have. Those courses are set up so that they should save anybody 10 to 50 times the cost of the course just by knowing what to say, knowing where the tricks are, knowing where the cost savings are and the money savings are. And I've put a special offer from Mortgage 360 in both of those courses that will save you at least 10 times your money. You're guaranteed to get 10 times your money back just for signing up. So go ahead, links in the description below, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. And don't forget about our race to 25,000 subscribers. I sincerely hope that you're going to be the winner. We'll see you in the next video. Cheers.